Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm very happy that our very active junior board is hosting this third webinar in the series, which we have before our next IRTC conference in Ljubljana. And it's on Can a Minerals Trust for the Green Transition Solve Geopolitical Resource Conflicts? And we're very happy to have our speakers here, who will be introduced later. And the webinar is organized by Tabatha, Chavez, Matus, Yanan, Liang, and Saurav, Roy.
I will kick off our talk by introducing the session, first saying welcome to all of you and thank you for joining. Thank you to our panelists and thank you for the organization for creating this webinar. So, mineral trust. In an increasingly interconnected world, access to critical raw material has become a key geopolitical concern. These resources that are essential for the life that we have now and how we envision our future when we're talking about clean energy technologies, digital infrastructure, and why not to mention defense application, are often concentrated in a few regions, a few jurisdictions, making supply chains vulnerable to trade restriction, resource nationalism, and geopolitical tensions. I think we have all seen, especially during January, what is happening with the geopolitics in the world, and critical raw material have been in the front cover of every magazine that we can read. As nations seek to secure their supply of critical material, strategies such as diversification, circular economy approaches, and international cooperation are gaining traction. So in this webinar, when we're going to be discussing mineral trust, we will explore the complex intersection of geopolitics and critical raw material. We're going to be discussing about risk, opportunities, and pathway toward a more resilient and transparent supply chain. And for this, it's an honor to have our two panelists today. I will try to be brief to give time to our panelists to discuss this. So Professor Ali Saleem, it's a distinguished professor from the University of Delaware, member of the International Resource Panel, who is a leading expert in resource governance and sustainable mining. With an extensive experience in policy framework, he has advised government and international organizations on responsible mineral supply chains, transparency, and ethical sourcing. His research focus on the geopolitical application of critical materials are key to discuss what we're going to be discussing today of the idea of mineral trust. On the other hand, we have Dr. Tulsidas, who is a senior advisor of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, UNECE. He specialized in sustainable resource management and critical raw material. With a background in geosciences and international policy, he has worked in global initiative promoting responsible sourcing, circular economy strategies, and the United Nations Framework Classification, UNFC, that many of you know. For resource evaluation, his expertise bridges the gaps between science, innovation, and policy implementation, helping stakeholders navigate complexities of mineral governance. So it is a pleasure for me to introduce these two panelists for our discussion. And Professor Saleem, the floor is yours.
It's really great to connect with young scholars who are interested in this topic, and my deep appreciation to Alessandra and the team for allowing us to do this as a prelude to your meeting in Ljubljana, which unfortunately I will not be able to attend. So with that, I wanted to dive right into the discussion of the Minerals Trust. And the reason why this is not going to be like a very long PowerPoint is that there's a detailed TED Talk on this topic, which I gave in New York a few months ago. And there's no point in repeating that. You are all welcome to Google the TED Talk first and watch that if you're interested in the full kind of elevator pitch about it. But my goal here is to really go to the next step after the TED Talk, what has happened. That talk has received about 500,000 views. It was sponsored by the Rockefeller Foundation as part of their initiative called Big Bets. They had an initiative to get public intellectuals and people who had spent time at their Bellagio Center in Italy working on research and book projects. And they asked us to come up with some ideas which were ambitious, goals that could really transform the way we handle major global problems. And so they asked me to think about what could be done about minerals. And so I came up with this idea of a big bet, which is a minerals trust. So it is by its very nature ambitious. It's the kind of idea which some people may roll their eyes and say, this guy is living in La La Land. And there are others who will dismiss it as someone who is in the ivory tower and is not connected to the realpolitik and the nitty-gritty of how the metal sector works. I think I'll try to convince you that I'm not a pie-in-the-sky academic. Actually, I'm trained as an environmental planner, and planners are very practical people. Planning is about the future. Planners are there to solve problems. Even though I'm the chair of a geography department, one of my challenges with geographers is that they are very much anchored in the past often and are not as willing to come up with solutions. Planners tend to be much more solutions oriented. So while we want to be critical, and I value that part of geography, which is critical of past mistakes and colonial hierarchies and power dynamics and all of that, I am here to now say, well, what we know that's there, but what can be a solution to that, right? The other factor, in terms of just to give you some confidence that this is not pie in the sky, is I have had experience with industry. In fact, my first job after my master's degree was I worked in General Electric Corporation, which at the time was one of the world's largest multinationals. And the CEO at the time was a guy named Jack Welch, whom you might know if you have followed business history, who was a legendary CEO who transformed GE from a company that was started by Thomas Edison and made light bulbs into one that was highly diversified, making everything from aircraft engines to plastics to even selling mortgages through GE Capital. So I have had experience in industry. And then I've had also public service roles. As was noted, I serve on the International Resource Panel with the UN. And also I was appointed by the UN Secretary General on the advisory board for zero waste. That is a 3-year mandate. We're in the middle of that as well. So I try to remain connected to the policy environment, even though I am very much, based at a university and an academic. All right. So that's kind of the background. Now, what is a minerals trust? Okay. The Minerals Trust is, first of all, dealing with a major global problem that we have around securing critical raw materials for the green transition. It is meant to be very focused on those minerals that we need for the green transition. This is not about, just any metal that we might need for infrastructure, for defense, and so on. It's very focused on those minerals for the green transition. In fact, the theoretical rationale for this is that certain kinds of natural resources are what we may consider planetary resources because they are important for our society, humanity as a civilization. So in some ways, the idea of a minerals trust is congruent to what has been also argued for certain kinds of minerals in the global commons. Like deep sea minerals, people have used the legal doctrine of a common heritage of humankind for those minerals, that they are for, the deep sea and the resources of the deep sea are in the common heritage of humankind. I would argue that those minerals specifically that we need for the green transition also have that ability to be considered that these are needed for that greater good of human civilizational sustainability. And so they are, even though traditionally law has favored these minerals being national jurisdiction, national ownership, and we are not challenging the ownership, we are just saying that access to them because of this greater good needs to be protected for humanity. The countries can still make profits from them. They still can claim ownership and sovereignty over them, but that they need to be able to provide access. Now, what is motivating me to do this? My motivation is twofold: economic efficiency and ecological efficiency. I told you I'm a planner, and planners are always trying to reconcile environmental and economic imperatives. The backbone of environmental planning is environmental impact assessment. An impact assessment is about trying to reconcile the economic benefit and the environmental harm, finding a middle ground on how do we do that, and building consensus around it. And what I fear is that currently geopolitics has led to a situation where critical minerals are being sourced in ways which is neither economically efficient nor ecologically efficient. Because from an economic point of view, you want to be able to mine or to be able to recycle or have other mechanisms for resource consumption that are in the areas where there is comparative advantage. That comparative advantage is something that forms the backbone of modern microeconomics, right? David Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage is what has allowed us to have trade. Trade is about, well, some people are better at doing some things versus others, and trade would allow for economic efficiency. Now, if certain, in the case of minerals, it's even more deterministic when it comes to comparative advantage, because minerals are inherently determined by geology. So certain areas are going to have comparative advantage because of their geology. And so we cannot just go anywhere and open a mine as though you might be able to do with certain kinds of factories, because you are determined by where they are. On the ecological side, you want to also have these resources extracted in ways which are most efficient from an environmental perspective, from an energy usage perspective. And so if you go down the road of having this geopolitical conflict around minerals, you will end up with countries who want to open mines and have this extraction in places where it might not be environmentally efficient, where you may not have the right energy resources to harness them. So the motivation for the Minerals Trust is specifically to make sure we are both economically efficient and ecologically efficient, while recognizing some of these constraints. So what's the basic core idea? The core idea is that you recognize that these resources, specifically for the green transition, again, I'm being very narrow about it. I'm not talking about everything, so countries don't need to be unsettled. Specifically, these minerals, they need to be traded through a mechanism which assures supply security and also gives confidence to both the people who are going to consume them and the ones who are going to produce them, that they will have a mechanism for this exchange. And a trust, the concept of a trust is one which, as the term suggests, has this larger goal. It's like a common asset trust that has this larger goal of providing the resource for some greater good. Okay, so that's where the motivation comes from and what is driving it. Now, as the diagram is showing you, you've got the technology producers and the consumers who are both trustees. Producers, so the people who are going to consume the resources and the mineral producers, they are both trustees. And that gives a certain level of shared governance to them. It's different from a cartel. People often say, oh, isn't this like OPEC? Of course not, because OPEC is about the producers. We are talking about the trustees are both the producers and the consumers, and they are going to be able to have exchange of information about what is needed for the green transition and what needs to be produced. It would be a voluntary mechanism by which they would join. And as an initial starting point, we would work with existing mines and existing smelters and existing refineries and those places where they are already there or are currently in plans for being built. Because remember, one of the goals of the trust is to prevent unnecessary greenfield development. So there's no point in having that. Some people were saying, well, isn't the trust going to then manage new mines and all? Well, down the road, we may realize that, we need new mines, and then there could be a mechanism whereby that happens. But the immediate goal is to focus on those where you have existing infrastructure, existing projects which are there, and to make sure they are harnessed most efficiently. We have seen in many cases there is oversupply also. With lithium, we have seen there has been such a fluctuation in prices with many of these. So you don't want to start greenfield development without this notion. And that's why the trust is also so important, because it prevents that kind of unnecessary extractivism, which our friends in the environmental community are also concerned about, right? And that's where also concerns about deep sea mining and other things come in. Now, in that regard, of course, I am someone who has very carefully tried to follow life cycle analysis methodologies to say, well, from an ecological efficiency perspective, where is it most ecologically efficient to extract resources? And we should follow that. If the trust comes to the point where you have to establish new sources, we should follow those kinds of tools from industrial ecology that are well known to many of you as well. So what we have proposed here in this diagram is you've got those trustees at the top. You have a vetting mechanism to make sure that the mineral producers are recognized as ones which have these ores that can be harnessed very efficiently from an ecological and economic point of view. And I have suggested the International Renewable Energy Agency can play this role. My colleague Julie Klinger, who is also at the University of Delaware, but currently is actually on sabbatical, on a study leave at the Institute for Human Sciences in Vienna, she has also suggested that you could have a mechanism in this area, just like you have nationally determined contributions for climate change mitigation. You could have a nationally determined contribution for minerals for the green transition. And she published a short op-ed with two of our PhD students in Nature Energy a few months ago that you are welcome to read, where she made this argument for the NDCs for the minerals. So I have combined that into this part of the diagram. The NDCs are referring to this suggestion from Dr. Klinger. And that goes into the minerals trust. Here, the minerals are sourced. On the technology side, you want to make sure only certain kinds of technologies are eligible to buy from the minerals trust, because they're getting this very special deal, right? Where they have the supply security, so that we are not concerned about the Defense Department people and others who are worried that this is going to subvert strategic minerals for their concerns. So the Climate Technology Center network of the UN, which is based in Copenhagen, could play that role in defining what are the eligible technologies that could buy from the Minerals Trust. The other feature of the Minerals Trust that is important is the stockpile. That because there is this shift in pricing and changes in technologies happen also. We have seen with battery technologies moving from certain kinds of electrodes to others. You would have also a stockpile which would buffer these kind of price fluctuations and also be made available as things change, as we diversify and so on. And the other feature of this, which is really important, is from a circular economy perspective, you would also have, if you have such an organized mechanism for trading, you would also be able to lease the minerals. As we see with copper now, there are companies which lease copper metal for wiring, which is for temporary usage and so on. And then that becomes part of a circular economy mechanism as well. So that's the core idea of the Minerals Trust. Where are we heading next with this, you might ask? Well, we are now in the process of writing a much more detailed academic paper. I'm leading that, which is focused on operationalizing the Minerals Trust with some colleagues. And that includes also some colleagues who were involved in the UN Secretary General's advisory panel on critical minerals that finished its report last September, which is being implemented by UNCTAD and UNEP. It also includes other academics from both the Global South and other resource-rich countries. So that is currently under review at a major publication. And then I'm working with specific governments to see if there would be capacity and interest in moving this forward. In particular, the European Union has shown some interest in this through the European Parliament, and also Canada has shown some interest. So those conversations are ongoing because I do want this to actually see the light of day in policy circles in some form. Maybe it won't be exactly in this form, but in some form. And the goal is that this would eventually lead to a situation where we do not have the current dynamic of geopolitical conflict over resources, nor errant development, which is leading to major environmental conflicts in many parts of the world also. So that's kind of where I'm at with this, and I look forward to now hearing from Hari, who has also done some great original thinking on these matters, and then having a broader conversation with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Saleem. I will continue with where Saleem has left the whole thing, and I have a few slides, more or less. Once again, welcome to all of you to this webinar, and let me thank the IRTC Junior Board for organizing a pre-conference webinar on this topic. So the last 2 days, world has been awaking to a new challenge, which we usually don't speak about a lot. It seems asteroid named 2024 YR4 is heading our way and may collide with the planet in 2032 or somewhere like that. So there was a 1.2% chance of that colliding with the planet, and 98.8% chance of it missing us. So we didn't consider it so important to discuss, waste our time on. But NASA did a reassessment, and then they doubled the risk. Now that asteroid has got a 2.4% chance of hitting the planet. So this has triggered some very quick actions. The James Webb Space Telescope is a very important venture which NASA is doing, but all the globe is participating. They have taken an emergency decision to turn the telescope towards the asteroid to carefully study its trajectory, to see how accurately we can predict whether it is going to hit the planet. And then suddenly yesterday, China announced setting up a planetary defense force to manage the risk of this asteroid as well as similar risk in future. So this is how people react to changes. They all come with innovative solutions, and they forget about the current conflicts they are having in various spheres and come together to address it. And Saleem has eloquently given a lot of such examples, real examples from the past where people have come together, united to address challenges. So are we doing those kind of things today? Yes, I will also take up the important examples like the internet and the open source software development, which has happened. Some in a very controlled intergovernmental fashion, some in a very open bazaar-like environment where everyone participated, the open source movement. So can we bring that kind of unity to address the most important challenge, the most important risk we are facing today? So it is climate, it is the planet getting too hot, but it is also a crisis of multi-dimensions. You have the food crisis happening alongside with that. You have the water crisis happening alongside with that. A large part of our planet will become very difficult to be inhabited by people because of the rise of the wet bulb temperature. The human body doesn't have the capacity to withstand high temperatures and high humidity beyond certain limits. And many parts of the world will have that kind of conditions where it will be impossible for people to stay there. And I'm not repeating it again, minerals provide the solutions to address these challenges, but there are risks that come along with extraction of minerals. So they are kind of intertwined. Now, again, minerals, why minerals are important? Because they are unlocking the key to the green technologies. They come with risk, which mainly are the supply chains, which are strained when demand surges and when resources are concentrated in a few geographies. And this makes it a double-edged sword. You have an opportunity, but you also have a risk in the minerals. But the world is too cold now to addressing these challenges. The current frameworks, the current conventions, these are all built in an era where we were not foreseeing this kind of a planetary crisis. So are they enough to fight the challenges of the climate, but which has got a multi-dimensional impact? It is impacting the biodiversity. It is also impacting the oceans, along with water, food, and other impacts I mentioned. Are our tools, which were built in the 20th century, enough to navigate this landscape of 21st century? Or is it a time to upgrade and we need more dynamic frameworks that will see the picture, the whole picture in a different way? To take an example, Professor Das Gupta has come with this biodiversity report in 2021. So the report, he says that we are bound by the gross domestic product, which is a real blind spot. Are we ignoring the value of nature with the current metrics we are using? Natural capital, it is a foundation over which we are building mineral wealth, we are building renewable energies, which is required for the green transition. It is building the natural capital is the foundation over which we built everything. Are we really giving any value to this natural capital? Are we accounting it properly? This is a question, one of the questions that the new landscape will have to answer. Long-termism is not about discounting the future. That is what we do in our accounting today, discounting the future, and you get a discounted value. that doesn't consider the future, and including the intergenerational aspects, which you all should be concerned about. So from our side, where I'm working in the UN Economic Commission for Europe. Some of you may be familiar with the tools which we are trying to promote, the UN Framework Classification for Resources and the UN Resource Management System, which we think are global standards for clarity and trust to build a resource-smart world of the future. These tools are being now adopted in the European Union. It is mandated in the Critical Raw Materials Act. It is mandated in Africa by the African Union, and it is getting an endorsement in Asia Pacific region. They are professional tools, and they put transparency, responsibility, and sustainability in the focus. But these are all not enough. Now, these tools, we need a bouquet of this kind of tools, new tools that are required for the future. So I am placing the Green Mineral Trust, which Saleem has just said, but also very eloquently presented in the TED talk, as a planetary mineral trust. It is trying to address a planetary level crisis. It is not something which we have seen in the past. I am also calling it a World Resources Bank because of one thing which we all know about, the World Bank. World Bank was born in the aftermath of World War II, the World War the Second. We had the World War the First, and we didn't learn lessons from that. We had the World War Second, and then it was realized that we have to stabilize the economy, and International Monetary Fund was launched at that point to see that the whole world can be economically work as a system, and we can work on reducing the inequality. The World Bank may not have worked to the full extent as they wanted at that point. There are still a lot of inequality today. There are few countries which are now listed as the least developed economies, least developed countries, where people work for less than $1 per day as wages. So this, something that worked 75 years ago, need a rethink, and we think we have to put resources in the middle of the things. And it should be something like World Resources Bank. And it is not something which is not too hot or not too cold, because it is not too hot to raise political distrust. It is not too cold so that it is ineffective. We want to find the balanced approach in putting forward such a concept. And it has to be pragmatic. We can have a very good idea, but it should have tools designed to impact real world. And that toolkit provides the resilience for building a strong resource future. So these are some of the things we envisage such an entity could have, and it could be the Green Minerals Trust or Planetary Mineral Trust or the World Resource Bank or any name you give it. It should have a new financial approach, and we call it the Janus currency, the two-faced currency that will have the monies and the molecules built into it. So money and molecules, that is the two faces of the currency. And it has got approaches like resources as a service. Today, we mine and deal with the resources as commodities. They are, very linear. There is no value beyond extraction. The value addition doesn't benefit the countries from where it is produced and so forth. We have a lot of issues, including the value chain, which is too fragmented and fragile. And this kind of a bank can have global buffer stocks. And Saleem has already said it as part of his vision in the mineral trust. It can have a global resource cooperation network. It can have intergenerational justice as one of the thing, and many more. We can. I'm not going through all the things that the bank can provide, including the global frameworks that are required for new kind of resource governance in the future. So it is about building cooperation networks, working together across boards, and democratizing these tools. Like I'm given the example of UNFC and UNRMS, which we are developing, but these tools are for everyone, everywhere. We need countless more tools to support the kind of resource governance and management that is required, and make the system effective and equitable. Saleem said about economics and environment, and we think that it should be effective and equitable as well. So I will not go too much into the details of the system. This is a very broad idea which I have worked with a colleague of mine, Julian Hilton. He's provided some of the very insightful ideas about this. But we think that this is something for the young generation to take forward. There could be an intergovernmental activity. UN, international organization like IRENA, and many others could play a part, but this is something which should be owned by the juniors, the young generation. It is a trust and a bank, and it is the young people's platform to shape the future. So this requires your expertise more than any other experience, and that is key to make the vision real. So you have to become the leaders in building this resilient resource model. So the three keys of this resilient resource future, just to remind you of the things which I've just mentioned, is a too hot situation we are facing. We have to act now on systemic resource risks. And what we have is something too cold. So we have to upgrade our frameworks, our tools, and our approaches to make our vision much more broader, much more than incremental, into a leap forward in establishing a mineral trust or a world resource bank. That is the just right solution now that we have to embrace and make this trust or a bank really something that is concrete, that should be the right path towards the young people in making the impact.